Asa, Harold's daughter, went to Gunnar in the morning, while he lay in bed. She ordered the housefolk out and sat down on his bed. They talked together in private a long time. Then he went up, dressed himself, and went to Vigdis in her bower. Vigdis stood up as soon as her father came in, very pale and in great fear. But Gunnar said little, and Asa stayed near him the whole time. He went over and looked at the child, saying, "It is plain to see who is his father." Vigdis made no answer, and then Gunnar spoke. "Often have I thought it hard that I had only the one child and no sons. But in my belief I always showed you affection and never harshness, thinking I should see you happy and honored before I died. But I had better been childless than hear you called wanton, and see your bastards grow up in this house in my old age." Vigdis answered, "True it is, father, that it were better you had no daughter." Gunnar said no more, but went out. Time went on, and now it was quiet at Vaden. They kept few servants about the manor, and little was seen in the neighborhood of Gunnar and his housefolk. Gunnar took this matter greatly to heart, so that he aged rapidly and became bent and feeble. The boy was settled there. Asa looked after him and was fond of him, but Vigdis showed him no affection, nor had she given him any name. She was still sorrowful, and went nowhere outside the courtyard of Vaden. One day Vigdis and Asa were in the kitchen house baking, and the boy ran to and fro. He was then 2 years old. Asa made him 2 little loaves and showed him how she would bake them for him. This made him so happy that he could not control himself, but danced about the woman asking for his loaves, and so he came to upset the meal bin. Vigdis picked the boy up, shook him, and beat him. "You never do aught but mischief," she said. The child howled and cried, but Vigdis carried him to the bench. "Sit there," she said, "and keep quiet. I will not hear you weep for so little." She went back to her kneading trough and busied herself for a time with her bread. Then she said to Asa, "Not much joy shall I have of this child, and I scarce think he will be the bane of any man. He does not take after me. I did not weep when he was made, but perhaps his father was not far from it." "You must not talk like this," replied Asa. Vigdis said no more and returned to her work again. The boy could not check his tears, but he held his hands before his face, and when his mother looked at him, he lay down and buried his head in some sacks that lay out on the bench. After a while, Asa went out. Vigdis then took the loaves from the girdle, went across and gave them to the boy. "Be quiet now and eat these," she said, and laid them in his lap. The boy stopped crying and looked at his mother. He fingered the loaves and found them too hot, and he was afraid. Seeing this, she stroked his hair 2 or 3 times, but after that she told him to go out to Asa. The winter wore on, and nothing happened that is worth relating. It was past the equinox, and the sun was gaining power down in the valleys, so that the snow on the roofs thawed in the daytime. Folk were felling timber in their woods, and one morning Gunnar rode out with one man to see his housecarls, who were at work west in the forest. About midday, Asa and Vigdis were in the hall setting food on the table, and Asa looked out of the door. "Gunnar is coming home already," she said, "but he seems to sit his horse strangely. He must be either drunk or sick." With that, she went out to meet him. Vigdis took the porridge pot from the fire and was setting out spoons, when she heard a great cry from Asa, and now they came in, Skofte and another man leading Gunnar between them. Asa walked beside them, wringing her hands. Vigdis then saw her father's face was pale, and that his white beard lay bloody upon his chest. Vigdis dropped all she had in her hands. She ran to her father and asked what had happened. Gunnar made signs that they were to carry him to the bench. He sat for a while, leaning his head against the wall. Then he said, "This has happened. I have spoke with Eolf and Grimelander, and our speech took such a turn that we shall have no more words together." Vigdis asked quickly, "Is Eolf killed?" "No," answered Gunnar, "but doubtless my end is at hand." Asa and Vigdis undressed Gunnar and looked at his wounds. They saw then that he spoke the truth. Vigdis said, "Now you must tell us, father, how this came about." Gunnar answered, It so chanced that we met in the woods, Eolv and I, and he used words to me about you, Vigdis. You can guess I did not keep calm and let him throw my daughter's dishonor in my teeth. Vigdis made no answer. They laid Gunnar in his bed. He bade Skofte go north at once and bring his housecarls home to the manor, for there was no knowing what the sons of Arne might do now. And said he, Eolf swore he would make Vigdis his leman. Asa seated herself by Gunnar, and Vigdis took Olav, the man who had been with Gunnar, into a corner and questioned him closely. How did you defend your master, Olav? As well as I could, the man replied. And Gunnar defended himself as you would expect of him. We killed each a man, but there were 6 of them. When Gunnar got his death blow, I ran to him and caught him as he fell from his horse, and then the others rode off. Do you know whither they were heading? Asked Vigdis again. I know that the Grimmelandings are lying by the tarn nearest the Gautestad wood, and they call the child's tarn, replied the housecarl. They are felling timber on the right there. Vigdis was silent for a moment, then she said, I dare say Eolf thinks he did a good work before his dinner. 'Tis likely the swine sleeps now, with a full belly. After saying this, she went out and crossed to the bower. She opened her chest and took out the priestess's knife, bound a dank kerchief about her head, and put on a black cloak. Stepping into the courtyard, she found skis and staff in the penthouse, and now she set out on skis across the fields up to the forest and kept along the edge of the woods towards Gautestad. She turned north of the houses and followed the low ridge that runs behind the manor. There was a hard crust under the trees, and her skis ran tightly, so it was not long before she sighted the white plain around the tarn and the log cabin that the Grimelander folk had there. There were signs that many men had passed over the ground, and timber had been drawn there. It was covered with chips, and bark and wisps of hay, but there was no one to be seen. Vigdis kept among the trees and stole under cover up to the cabin. She slipped off her skis and peeped in. An axe and a shield lay by the door, and she knew them for Eolf's. The cabin was 3 logs high and very narrow. She entered and saw that 2 men lay there asleep. One of them was Eolf. Vigdis went first to the other sleeping bench. She took the cloak that the man had spread over him and wrapped it about his head. With her other hand, she drew the knife and thrust it into his throat. The man died at once. Then she turned to where Eolf lay. Vigdis put her hand on his breast and woke him. Awake now, Eolf. You are to get what you long have sought for. Here is Vigdis from Vaden to make sport with you. Eolf started up from his sleep. The cabin was dark, and he could not see clearly. Vigdis said again, True it is that I have lost my honor since I have come to you in your bed. As she spoke, she struck at him with the knife. At this time, Vigdis did not miss her aim. Eolf fell backwards, and the blood gushed from his throat. She plunged the knife into him twice again, and the last time she did not draw it out, but let go of the haft and leaned forward to watch him die. She drew her hands through the blood that poured from him and dried them in his hair. And when Eolf had breathed his last, Vigdis went out, put on her skis, and started off through the forest. It had turned colder, and Vigdis moved rapidly, for now the way was mostly downhill. But now and again she had to stop, as her legs trembled under her, and all the time she could see Eolf dying under her hand. And it was to her as though she had now taken vengeance for more than Gunnar's death. She had now done violence upon a man, and he was no more able to defend himself against her than she against Leol. The thought stirred her so intensely that she did not know how wildly she ran on and scarcely saw where she was going. And so it chanced, as she was mounting a slope, that she came into a logging track, and there she met Cole Arneson and some of his men. They were driving empty timber sledges, and they saw her and called to her. Cole and another man ran out into the snow after her, but the crust was not hard enough to bear them, and they had no skis. Vigdis turned off through the copsewood, towards a stream that ran below and took to the ice, though it was gray and waterlogged. It barely held her and broke behind her skis, but over she came, and so she got away from them. After this, she did not stop till she reached the yard at home, and then she went straight into the hall and up to Gunnar's bed. He was asleep, and Asa sat beside him. Vigdis cried out, "Wake up, father. I have welcome news for you. I have now done what I could to lessen our shame, for Eolf Arneson is killed by me." Gunnar bade them raise him up in his bed, while Vigdis told him of her doings. Then Gunnar asked her to bend down that he might kiss her. He said, "You have now shown yourself a brave and manly woman, as I once hoped you would prove, and I no longer harbor anger against you for letting that Icelander seduce you. But I wish you all well, you and your child." Vigdis then told him of her meeting with Cole, and Gunnar asked if he had recognized her. "That I cannot say," answered Vigdis, "but he will recognize the priestess's knife, and that I left with Eolf." To this said Gunnar, "Little power have I to protect you, and it may be long ere Skofte comes back with the men. It will be best for you to take the boy and go to Grefsen at once. I can trust Geir that he will not forget the good I have done him. But Olav is to take all my goods here and hide them in that pool in the river, south of the hill on which our outer barn stands." "I will not leave you now, father," said Vigdis, but Gunnar replied, "It is my wish that you save yourself and your child, for I will not see our race perish. There is little strength left in me. I have lived long enough. But go at once to Grefsen, you and Asa." Asa said, "I am no good for running on skis, and I will not leave you now, Gunnar, good master that you have been to me and mine. Nor is it certain that Cole will come for us here tonight, but Vigdis must go, and Geir will surely give us all the help he can." Thus it was settled that Asa would stay with Gunnar. They could not dissuade her from it. Vigdis went to her bower, woke the boy, and dressed him. She collected her most costly possessions, gold and jewels, in a leather bag, and put some bread and smoked meat with them, for there was no time to feed the boy before they left. Then she took him on her arm, went back to her father, and bade him farewell. Gunnar kissed them both. Afterwards she took leave of Asa with great affection, and prayed they might meet again. She then went out and put on her skis, binding them fast to her feet with thongs. She had chosen a staff with a long iron spike and a ring. She tied the boy firmly on her back with a kerchief, and went rapidly out of the yard northward. The sun was now going down, and the crust was so hard that her skis scarcely left a mark in the snow, though she was carrying the boy on her back. She made the river and followed its course upstream till she found a place where the ice was safe, and then she went up on the slopes, where it was heavy going. She was tired, too, after her journey earlier in the day. When she had gained the high ground, she stopped and looked back. The sky was now red over the fjord. There was no sign of life as far as her eyes could reach, but at that time there was much forest and copsewood over the countryside. Vigdis went up toward Grefsen. She did not move fast, and the stars were coming out before she reached the house. There was no light to be seen when she entered the yard, and all the doors were closed. Vigdis went up and knocked with her ski staff, but no one came out, and there was not a living sound except that of the cows moving in the byre. She saw then that no one was home. While she stood thinking what was to be done, she put the boy down to get her breath. As she did so, he plucked at her cloak and pointed to the south. Vigdis looked that way, and now she saw a red glare in the sky where Vaden should be. It grew larger and larger, and with it was a cloud of black smoke. The boy was afraid and began to whimper, hiding his head in her lap. Then she lifted him up, saying, "Now they are burning your grandfather and Asa, your foster mother. Look well, boy, that you may never forget it." She could see now how the fire was spreading. The flames shot up, coloring the smoke red and golden. The barn had caught. Hay and corn whirled up into the sky in sparks, and it became the light as day, even where Vigdis stood. Then she saw many men on skis running quickly across the fields toward the river. she thought unwise to stay longer and best to make for the forest. Vigdis took the boy up again and went as quickly as her skis would run. She thought it best to follow the tracks leading from the house for some distance so that anyone who might come after her would not pick up her trail so easily. And she made for the northward, but she knew there were folk living by the great lake beyond the valley, and she thought they would not search for her so far as that. It was dark when she came into the forest, and she went by the light of the snow among the trees. The way was uphill, and it was bad going, so that she fell forwards many times and cut her face and hands so that the blood flowed. The night was cold, but she had no feeling of it, for the sweat poured off her, and her heart was beating so that she almost thought it would burst. Worse than that, the boy hung on her neck, and as she went uphill, he nearly strangled her. At long last, she found she was at the top of the ridge, and it was easier going. But it looked almost as though no one had passed this way before. When she turned around, Vigdis still saw the glare in the south between the treetops, but it was now much paler. After a while, the boy began to whimper again. It was cold and hungry. "Do not weep, little one," said his mother. "Soon we shall come to some dwelling. Then you shall have porridge and be put to bed." "Shall we soon be there?" asked the boy. "Yes, now we shall soon be there," said Vigdis. She unfastened her cloak, wound it about the child so that he lay as in a bag, and tied him tightly on her back. She now saw a white glade running downhill. Using her staff as a brake, she zigzagged down the slope. But the ground was rough, and every time her skis were brought to a halt, she felt her knees shaking and the sweat poured off her. The night was now starry, but it was hideously dark in the forest, for the moon would not rise till towards the morning. At last she saw a white plain below her, and guessed it must be the lake. She found a way down and started on it, but ran against a tree and fell. And then she felt that the binding of her left ski had broken. She had a knife on her and cut some withes and mended it as well as she could, setting the boy down in the snow the while. It was some time before she was ready to go on. Then she asked the boy as she lifted him up, "Are you cold, my son?" "No," said he. She felt his hands, and they were like ice. He felt nothing when she pinched them, and she guessed they were frostbitten. Then she set him on her lap and rubbed him with snow till it hurt him, and he began to cry. She wrapped him round as well as she could, and set out over the lake towards the northwest, for there she knew the houses lay. She then felt she had been chilled while tending the boy, and there was a keen wind from the northward over the lake. Vigdis had the wind against her, and it bit through her sweat-drenched clothes, making her feel almost naked. She kept under the western bank, looking out for a house, but saw none. At last, on a white slope, she saw what she took to be a house. She went up and found it was an outlying barn. Vigdis was then so worn out that she could go no farther. She found the door, and it was open, so she got her skis off and went in. It was pitch dark in the barn, and no warmer inside than out. But she felt with her hands till she found some hay in a corner. She buried herself in it, but the hay was cold as ice and did not give much warmth. The boy asked if they had got there, and if he was to have porridge. "They are not at home, the people of the house," said Vigdis. "You are tired, I know, but we must lie down and go to sleep. They will soon be here." "I am so hungry," said the boy. She then took out of her bag a little bread and meat, chewed it, and put it in his mouth. It was quieter after that, but he was shivering with cold, and so was she. Then Vigdis unfastened her clothes in front, and took the boy against her bare body, wrapped her cloak well about them both, and stacked up the hay as well as she could. The boy fell asleep, and it warmed her a little to have him there breathing against her bosom. She slept a little between whiles, but started up, thinking she was wading through snow in the darkness. This woke the child, and she prattled to him, as women do with little children. After that they lay a long time, and she heard the walls cracking in the frost. Through a crevice she saw that the moon was now shining on the snow, The boy woke again and was thirsty. She was thirsty too, and thought she would go out and fetch snow and find if she was able to move for the frost in her limbs. He was crying and would not let go of her. She had him on her arm as she went to the door. "Now they are coming home, the people who live here," said the child. Vigdis saw then that there were men on the lake far to the south. They carried torches. She went out and put on her skis again, and when she had gone a little way, she thought it better than lying in the barn. But she began to wonder how this journey would end. She had now come to a river and was following its course. She had heard that there was a river running into the lake from Hackadale, and she thought she must follow it if she had the strength till she came to some dwelling, but she did not know how far it might be. And the farther she went, the wearier she grew, and now it seemed that in the end she would have to lie down under a pine tree with the boy and move no more, nor did she think that any great loss. But still she went on and on. She crossed a great long lake and had the wind dead against her again. Then far away she heard the howling of wolves and quickened her pace, thinking perhaps it was so cold that wolves would not get wind of her. At last she could hear the wolves no longer, but only the sound of the river below the hillside on which she was going, and the moon shone bright and cold, and the shadows lay long and black upon the snow. Then she saw a great dark patch under the trees, and she was at the end of her strength. She crept in, broke off spruce twigs, as many as she could, and drew her legs up under her, took the boy in her lap, and wrapped her cloak around them both, to keep him as warm as she could. She rested her chin on his head, and then she knew no more, but slept and dozed as she sat there holding him. As day was dawning, Vigdis saw that she was sitting on a lofty ridge. Above her the mountain rose straight up into the sky, and below her ran a rapid river into a narrow valley. The boy was asleep and did not seem to have taken any hurt. Vigdis thought she must try to find the way to some dwelling, but she did not know where she was, and she was so weary that heavy-hearted that she did not move. After a while she tried nevertheless to rise to her feet, but as soon as she moved there was a clang close at hand, and an arrow flew out between the trees and buried itself in the trunk of the spruce under which she was sitting. And while it was still quivering, a man on skis appeared where it had come from. He halted on seeing her, and his surprise was so great that he stood speechless for a moment before asking, "Is anyone here?" Vigdis had not the strength to answer. Then he came up to her, and on seeing the child in her arms, he was even more astonished. He was a big man with long, fair, curly hair and beard, clothed all in skins, with an axe at his belt, a bow over his shoulder, and a spear in his hand. He spoke to her, and asked how she had come thus far, but Vigdis merely sat looking at him and could make no answer. Then the boy said, "They have burnt down grandfather's house." "When was that?" asked the man, "and where stood that house?" "I am from Vaden," said Vigdis. "It was this night." "Have you come so far this night?" said the other. "That was the worst journey I ever heard of for a woman." After a while he said again, "You must be got under a roof. 'Tis but a poor house I have, but better than here." He lifted her up, put his arm around her, and was going to carry the boy, but the child held fast to his mother and would not go to the strange man. And so Vigdis said she could carry him herself. The man then put his arm around her and helped her down towards the river. After a while, when he found she could scarcely stand upright, he took her off her skis, and then he carried both Vigdis and the boy and her skis a long way, and she knew little more until they came to a narrow mountain track. It led to a little hut, and there he sat her down. He said then, "It has gone badly with that hand of yours," and he lifted up her left hand. Vigdis then saw that it was greenish-white and clear like ice. He then drew off her socks and shoes and rubbed her with snow a long while, but that left hand still had an ugly look. At last he gave it up and led her into the hut to a bed. He gave her a drink from a horn, and she fell asleep at once, though her hand pained her. Late in the evening Vigdis awoke, and now she saw that a fire was burning on the hearth, and around it sat 3 men. ill-clad in rags, but well armed and bejeweled. They were the ones she had met in the forest, and two more. The pain in her hand increased, so that she was scarcely able to eat of the food the men offered her, and it grew worse and worse as the night wore on. Her whole arm was aching, and it spread to her breast. In the morning, the man she had first met, his name was Ilug, asked how she felt. Vigdis answered that she had never known such pain, and asked if he had thought it might mend. The man looked at her, and thought it had an ugly look. Vigdis said, "Then you must help me and cut off these 3 fingers. Ilug looked at her for a while, but judged at last that she was right, and so it was done. One of his companions took her in his arms and held her so that she could not move, and Ilug took off 3 middle fingers, the 3 middle fingers of her left hand. Vigdis made no moan, but merely said when it was done, "You are a strong man, Ilug, and deft-handed. I should judge." Ilug then bound up the wound and put her to bed. She was ill for a time, but after that she began to mend, and was able to tell the men all about her journey. These 3 men who lived in the hut were outlaws. Vigdis well remembered having heard of such fellows, who were said to make these forests unsafe for travelers. 2 of them were brothers, named Isle Ermund and Einar Hadalandang. Ilug, the 3rd, had come from the north country. He was a very handsome man, tall and well-built, with small hands and feet, good features, a hooked nose, blue eyes, and long, curly, fair hair and a beard. One morning, when Vigdis was much better, Ilug came to her as she sat alone with the boy. They talked together for a while. Then he said, "We have been talking, my companion and I. It is not easy for us to get ourselves a woman up here in the forest. Your case is not much better than ours, since you are driven away from the haunts of men. Now this is what we must do. You and I shall share a bed, and when spring comes I shall build a house for myself farther north of the lake. Hermod and Einar will also see to getting themselves wives." Vigdis sat with the boy on her lap. She answered, "I have too good a trust in you, Ilug, to think you will force me." Ilug answered after a pause, "Force you I will not, but I do not know why you should wait, for in the end you must take one of us, and I think I have the most right to you. There is a good place here for fishing and hunting by the lake, which we call Bear Lake, and you will be better off, you and your boy, than you could have looked to be when I found you." Vigdis answered, "You must be content with much less than one would expect of men like you, if you will live in a miserable clearing in the depth of the forest, far away from any dwelling. I cannot see why you and the others do not come back among your fellow men. I do not believe that any men would dare to deny you peace where I come from, for there is none that can compare with any one of you." Ilug told her that it was not so easy to leave the forest as she thought. Vigdis said, "I am not minded to let Cole Arneson, who burned my father in his house, drive me and my son from our home, though I am but a lonely woman and young too. I know well where father hid his gold before he died, and I mean to get that back too. But if you will help me, you and your friends, I will share with you, as is the custom among comrades, and our fate shall be alike." "You are a bold woman," replied Ilug, "but Oslo lies too near, and our deeds are too well known there. If King Olav were not in Hadaland this winter, it might be." Then said Vigdis, "It may be that is best of all for us. I have good cause to appeal to the king, and I have heard too that he preaches the new faith and is very friendly towards all who become Christian. But at my home there are many who hold fast to the gods and sacrifice at Thor's temple. My counsel is that I go to King Olav, and if none of you dare go with me, it will be well enough if one show me the way through the forest. Then I think our lot will be better, and I promise it shall be the same for you as for me." After this, Vigdis had more talk with the outlaws about her plan. Einar Hadalending, who was the youngest of them, greatly wished to try to win back his father's estate, and Hermod said he had long been tired of this rough life. His heart was set on getting a ship and leaving the country. Illugi was less ready to yield and often talked with Vigdis when they were alone, saying she must be his wife. Her answer was that they might talk of that when she had got back to Vaden. And in the end, Illugi promised to accompany her northward to the king in Hadeland.